Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. Which of Henry VIII's wives was the most important? Henry VIII is most famously known for his 6 wives and queens. However, the turmoil with regards to his love life changed the face of English history forever. There has been much debate over the centuries as to who was the most significant wife of the notorious Tudor monarch, and there has even been a musical written about it, but each of the women were one of a kind and had no category. Each of Henry VIII's wives played a pivotal role in the story of the nation, and for the king, who was known for a wandering eye, each of them were very different in their outlooks and personalities. But 2 of his wives lost their heads inside the Tower of London, executed at the behest of Henry, and it's fair to say, following the deaths of Anne Boleyn, things really went downhill for the King of England. As the line goes, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. But was the one who survived the most important? In this video, we're going to debate who we really think is the most important of Henry VIII's wives. And if you do disagree or have an opinion, tell us and put your list in the comments below, as we would love to hear and see your opinions. Now, at the bottom of our list, at number 6, is Catherine Howard. Catherine Howard is who we consider to be the least significant of Henry VIII's wives. She was his 5th queen, and was just a young teenage girl when she married the much older and grotesque King of England. She was the niece of the influential Thomas Howard, the 3rd Duke of Norfolk, and through her uncle, she secured her place at court. Catherine's beauty and youthfulness caught Henry's attention, and quickly he pursued her, and Henry got what he wanted, eventually marrying her 19 days after he annulled his 4th marriage. Nothing says true love like marrying someone new 3 weeks after you get rid of your previous wife. However, Catherine, it's clear, was never fit for the duty of being queen or a consort, and she was deemed to be too carefree. But her marriage to Henry was blighted with incredible scandal at court, as she seemed to strike up an affair with one of the king's favourite male courtiers, Thomas Culpeper. Culpeper and her, it's believed, engaged in liaisons together, and then further information emerged about Catherine's previous behaviour with regards to relationships, with this clear evidence of adultery that was seemingly obtained, and the king was informed of his 5th wife's indiscretions. Following this, Henry, who was informed of his wife's adultery inside the chapel at Hampton Court Palace, was understandably furious, and the men accused of sleeping with her were then beheaded and hung, drawn and quartered. But Catherine Howard then also met a very similar fate. She was taken to the Tower of London, where she passed by barge under the heads of her former lovers, and she was imprisoned at history's most infamous prison. Her execution was scheduled for 7 a.m. on Monday the 13th of February 1542, and on Tower Green, the same place where Anne Boleyn was executed, the head of Catherine Howard was struck off. In one final act of horror, the commoner's axe was used for her execution, rather than a sword, and Henry then literally tried to eradicate her from history. As her body was buried inside the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, it's claimed that her body was covered in quicklime to dissolve it, literally wiping her off the face of the earth. Now, the reason Catherine Howard is the most insignificant in our opinion is the fact she was never crowned Queen of England. She also had no impact, as she didn't do anything with her elevated status. However, Henry's opinion of her tells us a great deal. By trying to erase her by the use of quicklime, it shows us that Henry, by her betrayal, wished to make it as if she had never lived, and if their marriage had never been a thing. When she died, she was simply a young girl who foolishly went against the king in a sordid way with one of his closest friends. Number 5 on our list is Anne of Cleves. The scandal with regards to Henry VIII's 4th wife cost the king greatly with regards to fortunes, estates and respect. Following the death of his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, in childbirth, Henry did have what he wanted. He had the male heir he greatly wished for, but quickly after her death a new wife for the King of England was sought for. Thomas Cromwell was dispatched yet again to deal with the issue, and he proposed a match with the Dutch daughters of the German Cleves. Amalia and her older sister Anne were painted by Hans Holbein, and Henry, when he viewed the portraits, chose to marry Anne of Cleves. However, following the marriage proposals, when Anne arrived on English soil, the choice was a terrible one. Henry regarded her as not the best looking, and he wondered why on earth he had agreed to marry her. But the problem was that he was trapped by the negotiations, and Anne herself failed to even recognise the king. Because of these reasons, Henry tried to get out of the marriage as quick as he could, and within 6 months the marriage was declared unconsummated, and Anne of Cleves was not crowned queen. She instead was given a very generous settlement, including a palace in Richmond and other properties around the country. This annulment cost the king greatly, but we consider Anne of Cleves to be Henry's 5th wife, yet also the most lucky. Yet in terms of her impact on history, it was rather insignificant. She managed to outlive all of Henry's other wives, but across Europe and Germany, she was very well thought of. Her relationship with the king had little to no impact, and she was nothing short of a disaster, but at least she didn't lose her head. She became known as the king's sister after her annulment, which was considered a slight honour. 4th in our list is Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour by some is considered to have been the one Henry truly loved. However, this simply is not the case. She's only considered this because she gave birth to the son that Henry greatly wished for, the successor, Edward VI. Edward's reign itself saw a large amount of religious change, but Jane was regarded as Henry's mistress during his marriage to Anne Boleyn. Allegedly, during one moment, Jane was seen sitting on the king's knee, and Anne Boleyn, who flew into a fit of rage, then miscarried a child because of the shock. However, Jane was a gentle and peaceful girl, and was very different to Anne. She was seen as a girl who was not the most educated, but excelled at household chores and jobs such as needlework. Jane was betrothed to Henry a day after Anne Boleyn's execution, and they married shortly after. She was given a large amount of land and was proclaimed queen, but she was noted to have been strict and formal. Her court and the queen's household shrunk massively during her short time as queen compared to Anne Boleyn's court. Following Jane's birth to Edward, her difficult labour cost her her life, and she passed away on the 24th of October 1537 at Hampton Court Palace. Jane is the 4th most important wife in our eyes for a number of reasons. Her death was tragic, but we don't believe that she was the most loved or important. Following her death, Henry rather quickly sought to find a new wife, and it was said that although he wore black for the next 3 months, the quest for the new wife was started shortly after. Jane did give birth to the son, the successor, which does make her significant, but she died before she could make a larger impact on history. Henry was buried next to Jane too, but we feel that the 3 of his other wives were more significant. 3rd on our list is Katherine Parr, the one who survived and who valiantly outlived the king. Katherine Parr's life was one which was very different to what Henry looked for initially in a wife. She had been married twice before she became the queen consort, marrying the king in 1543, 4 years before he passed away. Catherine was seen by many as a rather radical Protestant, who was also very important with regards to promoting female advancement in terms of the arts and also literature. She even got a woman to paint her picture, and she championed women who wanted to make a difference for culture. Catherine also published a number of books herself, but because of her Protestant sympathies, she did incur the wrath of some anti-Protestant and reformist officials. They tried to arrest her and did succeed in this, but Henry VIII reconciled with his 6th wife on this matter. Katherine Parr was the one who survived Henry VIII, and she's been portrayed in history as the woman who looked after him in his dying moments. After Henry's death, Catherine was given an allowance of £7,000 a year to support herself, which was a sizable sum of money. But following this, she married Thomas Seymour, the 1st Baron Seymour of Sudley, whom she was rumoured to have loved for a while. However, during this marriage, Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth I, was abused by her husband, and Catherine put this down to nothing more than horseplay. We've listed Katherine Parr as the third most significant of Henry's wives for a number of reasons. Firstly, she did make a significant contribution to literature, religion and culture at the same time, and her radical ideas almost led to her losing her head or being executed. Heresy was a crime punishable by being burnt at the stake, and this is the fate Catherine could have encountered. She did a lot for women inside of Tudor England, but it's not really considered that she nursed the king in his final days. She was strong-willed and outspoken, and was not afraid to speak her mind. She did not conform to what was expected of a queen consort at the time, and the fact she outlived the king also was a huge positive for her. She is classed as one of the first feminists of the time, and also she helped a number of women to read. And also, after her death, it's considered that her funeral was the first Protestant funeral service of its kind. Now, number 2 in our list is Catherine of Aragon. Henry VIII's first wife and longest serving was Catherine of Aragon. Initially, she was married to the elder brother of Henry, Arthur, who died at a young age inside Ludlow Castle, but negotiations then occurred for her to marry Arthur's younger brother, and her and Henry VIII married in 1509. She became the queen consort and served until 1533 in this role. Catherine was seen as a worthy queen, and whilst the king was away, she ruled as regent of England, and during this time she saw off the Scottish at the Battle of Flodden, which was seen as a huge victory. Henry VIII was impressed with this. However, he repaid her by falling in love with a new lady who came to court, Anne Boleyn. Anne charmed Henry, and his affections shifted from Catherine to her, and he tried his best to get the Pope to annul his first marriage. However, the papacy would not relent, and because of this, Henry declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This split England in two, and the clergy and nobility had to accept the king as the head of the church, which caused chaos. Eventually, in 1533, Catherine and the king's marriage was declared invalid, but later Catherine passed away in 1536 from cancer. She had given the king his eldest child, who later went on to become Mary I. It's clear that Catherine had a very important and influential role in history, and initially her marriage to the king was a very happy and considered peaceful one. But as the king's attention was caught with a younger woman, he ditched Catherine in spectacular and sorry fashion. He also shunned Mary slightly, and the two suffered from the king's wandering eye. She did a lot for Henry in terms of standing in for the king when he was away in Europe, and in her own mind she believed strongly that she was the king's one true queen, and she died in this fashion. The king's great matter split the country in two, and changed religion in England forever. She birthed a future Queen of England, and she was known for being a devout Catholic. Now, number 1 in our list, and in our opinion the most important queen, was Anne Boleyn. Now, we regard Anne Boleyn, the second wife of the king, as the most infamous and significant queen of Henry VIII. She was the one who caught the king's eye so drastically that the English Reformation was started. Henry declared himself the supreme head of the church, and England was changed forever. She was a girl who stood by what she believed she deserved, to be the queen. Anne had seen her sister become the king's mistress, but she wanted to be the queen. She believed that if the king wanted her so bad, then he should sort out the problem of his first wife, and he should annul or divorce Catherine of Aragon. Anne forced Henry to seek any way he could out of his marriage, and the lust he had to sleep with her drove him to do what was necessary. After the annulment of Catherine, Henry was free to marry Anne. Anne was also key in the downfall of Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, who had failed earlier to get the king what he wanted. Anne and Henry formally married on the 25th of January 1533, after a secret marriage ceremony occurred months before. She was crowned queen on the 1st of June 1534. However, on the 7th of September, she gave birth to a daughter who became one of England's greatest ever monarchs, Elizabeth I. Anne's daughter went on to defeat the Spanish Armada, tried to solve the issue with religion, and reigned during a golden age for culture, where Shakespeare was writing and having his plays performed. But what Anne Boleyn is most famously remembered for is her death, which occurred inside the Tower of London. Henry's eyes shifted once again towards Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, and Henry put Thomas Cromwell to task to get him out of the marriage to Anne. Cromwell spun an intricate web of deceit, scandal and lies which saw Anne accused of treason, incest, adultery with 5 men, one of which included her brother. She was found guilty of the charges, and was then beheaded by a swordsman on Tower Green on the 19th of May 1536. Anne Boleyn is the most significant of Henry's wives as she split the country in two, beginning the English Reformation as the king declared himself the supreme head of the church. She is regarded by some as the most influential and important queen consort England has ever had, as her refusal to engage with intimate relations with the king caused her to get what she wanted. She was seen as captivating, and she spent lavishly at court renovating palaces such as Hampton Court in her short time in power. Her downfall was brutal and savage, and her execution was one of the most shocking in history. But her legacy is defined through her daughter, and the impact she had on the country. Elizabeth I was one of the greatest queens, and she remembered closely the fate of her mother. Today Anne Boleyn lies under the floor of the Chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula inside the Tower of London, where her headless remains lie beneath the altar. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.